today I had the chance to talk to the solo developer behind the upcoming roguelike town builder, Kainga. Now, Erik and I had a great conversation about the world itself within the game, the animation style. We got to talk about some of the different animals within the game, some of the different things that you'll be able to use to build your town, some of the different styles and challenges that you're going to face. We covered a whole bunch of different things, and I had a blast talking about it. I can't wait for you to dive into the interview. So without further ado, it's time for us to get into Kainga.
Tell me about why you started making games and where it all came to this one.
I started a few years ago, just kind of to see if I could, just as like a test, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There was an old game called Populous, The Beginning. I really liked that game and I've been waiting for a sequel to it for a long time. And I thought, why don't I just make it myself?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of just thought of all the things that I wanted in a game that I wanted to play, and then just started designing that. So this is my first game that I've ever created.
Mm-hmm.
So it took some time just to learn like the basics of programming or basics of game design.
You had no background in like game development at all before this?
No, I mean I did a few mods for like Morrowind and Jedi Knight, but apart from that, no. Not at all. Like no web development experience either. I was an artist. I did a little bit of watercolor painting for about a year and a half, but other than that, no.
Is that where the art style kind of came from? Your background in art?
I'm not a cartoonist, so that's why the drawings are kind of amateur.
Well,
but
I mean, it all kind of lends to where you were going with the direction, I feel, though. So it does work very well.
Basically, I planned ahead to cut as many corners as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the animations are only 4 frames because that's the minimum that you can have in a run animation to make it look like he's running.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of my thought process.
Okay.
Just make it as easy as possible, but look as good as possible.
Yeah, simple but a solid surrounding base to it. Yeah. So I played it briefly, and I looked through a bunch of different stuff for it, the Kickstarter, Steam page, all that.
Mm-hmm.
So the game, does it have a story mode to it? Are there different modes when the game launches? I know it has the different challenges with each time you go in. So is that something you're going to expand on in the future? Or like I said, will there be like a full on story mode when the game launches?
I don't plan to do like the same story per se.
Mm-hmm.
What I would like to do is just keep it as a world of just these challenges, and then add, I guess it could be similar to story elements that you unlock doing specific missions. So there would be like, I guess like a broader quest that would ask you to do these 4 specific missions in this specific way, and that would unlock some meta progression for the thinkers themselves.
It seems like the kind of a game where it has a lot of potential to segue into multiplayer per se. Not to say that it would, but it has that potential. I know that's a nightmare when it comes to coding and getting everything balanced, but is that something you've ever actually thought about, something you anticipate doing? Is this something that's in the pipeline at this point?
Yeah, of course. I definitely thought about it, and I would love to do it. And I think it kind of lends itself to multiplayer quite well. I think it would be really cool to see like 2 people fighting against each other, building different villages and stuff. But just as it on the technical side, I think it's a bit much for me. So I think I have a very strict roadmap I've kind of laid out for myself that does not include multiplayer, just to make sure that I do get the game completed.
Yeah.
Without that. But once the game's done and I want to dive into a multiplayer version or expansion or something like that, I would love to do that if it were possible.
I didn't have this question written down, and we haven't even gotten to the game itself at this point, but have you ever thought, like, this is your first game, down the road, are you anticipating continuing this, or is this just kind of a one-off thing for you?
I would like to branch out into other areas as well. I would like to try some other types of games in the future, like way down the line. I'm pretty focused on this project to see it through all the way to the end, which should be it's going to release in early access in a couple months. And then it's going to release, I plan to finish it full release in the following year around this time.
Okay.
2022. But after that point, assuming I don't do a multiplayer or something like that, I would like to go for something totally different.
And so you'd mentioned you got early access coming out in a couple months. Do you want to narrow that down to like a specific month, or is it a surprise at this point?
Oh, it's the exact date has not been locked in, but it should be October.
Okay, October. Very nice. So,
yeah,
talk to me about the game itself. Talk to me about is multiple different zones. There's a whole bunch of different. I guess let's just focus on the zones first. Tell me about the different areas that you kind of can play within, and how they differ, and how just the overall challenges vary from place to place.
Sure. So it's a roguelike city builder or village builder, I call it, where one of the main pillars of the game design is that you create these villages that are adapted to the environment and your surroundings. So a big part of that was to create varied environments. And that's not only about like climate, but also elevation and like verticality and how much space you have or don't have. So I try to play with a lot of those elements. I started with a center region, which is a little bit tropical and has a little bit of everything mixed in. And then the second environment I added a couple months ago was the desert flatlands, it's called, which is a lot more open. You have a lot more space, but fewer resources. There's no choke points or anything like that. So I try to introduce different challenges to different environments. I'm working on another one now, which is Archipelago, which is a series of small islands. So it'll be kind of the opposite, where you have very little space and very little room to grow, but you're also isolated, so protected, but also you can't get where you want to be.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue, because there's a whole bunch of different animals within the game, and the question was just kind of touch briefly on all of them. Another question that actually comes to mind with that is, with each environment, are there certain ones that are much more difficult than others? How does that kind of work into the strategy within like picking which one you want to go into?
I try to make the environments difficult for different reasons. Mm-hmm. So like the basic area, this normal area, the default area, which is called the terraces, has a lot of problems with clouds and rain. Rain can destroy your buildings, and then it has floods as well. And then the desert, that's not an issue as much. And there's no floods at all, but there's fires that are a problem. So it's kind of like, how do you want to protect your village depends on the area that you're in more than others.
Yeah.
And then for the animals themselves, I've created a series of kind of odd animal choices. I wanted the people to be, look like recognizable people, but the creatures I wanted to branch out a little bit and make them a little bit more fantastical, without going for the typical dragons and wolves and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, and I've kind of broken them into three categories. There's the small, medium, and large, where the small is actually much bigger than a person. And that's the minimum size I want to go for. Like the giant snail that breathes acid. And then there's one called a flathead, which has a flat head, and he charges into you. And then medium, I have a walker, which is kind of my iconic animal.
Yeah.
Which is like a large beetle, I guess, with long legs that can kind of traverse the terrain easily. And I have another one, it's a trudger, which is like a giant turtle that dips its mouth into the sand and digs around. So, and those ones can be... There's a whole bunch, and they can all be tamed, and they can be built upon as well.
Yeah.
With like additions, so you can add like a war rig or a giant drum or something.
Even the snails, like the smaller ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
The snail, you can put the drum on that, and then the medium-sized ones you can put platforms. Then you can even build houses on top of them. And then the massive ones, potentially you could have your whole town on top of it if it was a compact town.
And I'm guessing does that make it safer, or does that make it more dangerous to be on those guys?
That's a good question. I guess
Yeah.
a little bit
of both.
less control, you know?
Ah,
You don't know where you're going or
you're
where
mobile,
you might
though,
end
so
up.
that's a good thing,
Yeah.
right? Okay, gotcha. And so with all the different animals and stuff like that, and the different areas, with a game like this, one of the biggest, the most positive things to it is that you can freely add on to it whenever you want, basically. So I'm sure you have a whole bunch of different things planned down the road. From things like Gamescom, things like your Kickstarter, how much does, the player base that have already tried your game, how much does that have an impact on just what you're adding into your game? I saw you have polls and stuff like that, so kind of how does that play into everything?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of flexibility to what I add in. And like you said, this kind of game, like being a roguelite, really lends itself well to being able to add as much as you want, whenever you want.
Yeah.
Because it's not story-based or anything like that. So keeping in mind that I can't go crazy with like feature creep, I'm very flexible to add like people's ideas into the game. So if listeners have ideas, like let me know, and I'll see what I can do.
One of the questions actually that I forgot to ask you when we initially were talking about you developing the game. So with all the different things you've been adding on, how long have you been actually making this game?
I've been making it full time since January.
Oh, wow.
But I've been learning to make this game about 2 years before that.
Okay. So it really just kind of exploded like this year.
Yeah.
That is very fast, actually. That's very impressive. Most developments last like 3 to 4 years, so it's really good.
Yeah. So it took me some time to like get the basics down, and I had a really terrible looking game that nobody knew what was going on. And then like recently, it's all started to come together really nicely, and people have really grabbed onto it, which is great. It's so cool to see.
It's a really nice game. It looks really, really fun, and when I played it, I had a blast with it. And to be honest, I've never played City Builders ever up to this point. I saw your game and I thought it looked really cool, and I was like, all right, let's give it a try, and I'm glad I did. One of the things that's a very major part of the game is the thinkers. So kind of talk to me about that. Talk to me about just the different things that go into them and how they impact the game.
I guess the idea behind the thinkers is that they're, I guess the game Populous, the beginning that I mentioned before, had this really powerful leader, which was a shaman that would like do magic and stuff, and that was your leader. And I wanted to do something similar to that but different, and I didn't want to do any magic, so I went with a thinker who's kind of like the king in chess, who, you have to protect him with, everybody can die for the king, but then if he goes down, then you lose.
Okay.
And I based it around that originally, and then I kind of expanded on that idea where I didn't like the idea that people were just like, killing each other. These tribes were killing each other for nothing. So I kind of made it into a game where the thinkers, after you go down and do your challenge, if you win or lose, you go back up to this hub world, and then your enemies are there, like just chatting, having a good time, talking about the events of the previous game and what they're gonna do next time and stuff like that.
That's the Hall of Thinkers, right? That's what you're talking about right there.
Yeah.
One of the questions, and I couldn't actually think of how to word it when I was writing the questionnaire out. So if, as you play, obviously you're going to play as different thinkers throughout the different playthroughs. So how does, say, if you play as one and then you switch over to a different one and you go back into the game, does that impact how the previous thinker that you had played as would, I guess, confront you within the game world? Does that have any impact on it at all from a strategy standpoint, or am I reaching too far with that one?
At the moment, not really. They do have traits that they're better, like, what do you call it? They have a focus. So there's like a war-focused thinker and like a more technical focused thinker, and then a population-based thinker.
They each have like a specific skill.
Yeah, and they do. They start with bonuses and different starting crew and all of that. It's pretty. The system at the moment is pretty bare bones. It needs to be expanded on, and that's one of my long-term goals. Um, but if you win as one thinker and then you swap to the other one, um, that won't affect the relationship.
Gotcha.
Not yet. But I do have a plan for. I'm not sure how this would work out. I've tested it a little bit, but I have a plan that the thinkers will remember the villages that you won, like the layouts of the towns that you succeeded with, and then they might lay out their town that way in the future.
Oh, okay. It's kind of like to mimic you in a way.
Yeah, so you might be fighting against your best
previous
town next time.
That's a really cool idea. I like that a lot. And that actually
let's see how it works out.
That leads me into the next question, because there's a whole bunch of different skills you can have. There's the different technologies you can acquire. There's the tech trees. And then there's karma, which is the point system you get within the game. So before we get into any of the technologies, tell me about how you get your karma and how you kind of can acquire it throughout the game.
So the karma you earn from completing challenges and also from doing just difficult tasks like killing other thinkers or taming some of the beasts or something like that. Oh, and also from festivals. So the karma is just kind of basically it's just gonna give you this resource that you can only spend in the Hall of Thinkers.
Gotcha.
And it expands your arsenal of technology. Not necessarily better well, it could be better, but also more complicated technology. So I kind of start the game off with all the basic stuff like farms and basic houses and stuff like that, and then slowly over time as you play, the technology gets weirder and weirder.
Okay.
So you end up with like balloons and fishing towers and these windmills that blow clouds away and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Okay. So my next question, before we actually, talk to me about the technologies and the tech trees first, and then we'll segue into the next thing. Because there's a whole bunch of technologies, and I know you can't touch on all of them, obviously, but kind of as a overall thing, can you kind of briefly explore a couple different ones and kind of explain the tech trees and how they work?
Sure. So the technologies are broken into like categories. So you have food-based categories or food-based technologies, like I said before, and protection or like war-based technologies. And then when you your technology tree will be dotted with these groups. And when you click on one of the groups, it'll show you 3 options from that group, and it's randomly chosen, of course. But it's also chosen based on your previous choices, and also the map that you're in and what's around you. So that kind of ensures that you can get some unusual technologies every time you play, and also that you can continue along the path that you're already on. So if you get like animal-based technologies, then you end up getting more of those in the future to try to accommodate that build. And I try to keep them understandable. It's simple, but also surprising. And a lot of it is like, I try to keep to this rule that every technology or every building needs a person to manage.
Okay.
That way you can kind of keep track of how many people you need to run the town that you're in.
So before we kind of move into the last couple questions, give me just an average. I know it kind of varies, but give me an average of how long each, I guess, playthrough would go.
I think for each game, it's about 20 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
So if you're playing multiple games, then yeah, you can play for 4 hours for sure.
Okay.
But I try to make each game as small as possible, as short as possible, so you can experiment, and then fail and jump back in and try something else.
It's a long ways off, but when you launch, do you have any plans to go to console? Switch is very, very, I know they love bringing on indie devs. Xbox has been doing it more recently. Is there anything you've targeted at this point? Anything you're thinking about?
I would love to go to Xbox and Switch. But again, as this is my first time, I don't have the knowledge on how to do it. I know that there's people that can push that transition along quite nicely, which would be cool. So
it's just something.
Let me know.
Yeah, you've thought about it, but you've never quite actually, gotten to that point yet. I understand that. Yeah.
I would be happy seeing it on PC only. But if the opportunity comes up to push it to Xbox or Switch or anything, then I'm for it.
It's fully controller compatible, correct?
It's not.
It's not at all.
But it could be.
Okay.
No, I don't have a controller. Otherwise, it would be.
Yeah. Well, the reason I would ask is because during development, I know it's really hard to integrate controller compatibility at the end. With roguelites,
really?
It might be a little bit easier for roguelites, especially with a game structured the way yours is. It might be, but it's just a thought that randomly came to mind. So, what is your favorite part of the entire game? When you started developing it, was there something that jumped out to you? Just an overarching thing, a character, whatever it may be?
I really like the houses themselves, how they reflect exactly what resources are around you, and they change the way they look, they change the way they interact with the environment. For example, if you build houses close to each other, they'll build these little bridges between each house, and whatever type of roof you have, it changes the way that it looks and feels. And I think that really makes the game feel unique every time you play it. I really like that part. I have about 16 house types and then the 9 different types of roofs, so it can get really, there's a lot of variety there if you mix them all up. I really like the way that worked out. Pretty cool.
With this game, I know you said it's your first one. However, what was the most difficult part about developing it? Where was the biggest learning curve for you? I know a lot of developers say it's just scope creep in general. It gets to that point where they need to start dialing it back. But for you, where was that hurdle?
Well, maybe I haven't reached that point yet, but I've done really well planning in terms of time and what to put in, what to keep out.
Yeah.
So the biggest hurdle for me was just basic AI, specifically combat AI. Getting people to find, like, when there's these big battles, like 20 versus 20 or 100 or 100, getting each character to find an enemy, attack them, and stand next to them but not inside of them.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare creating all that. But I think it's still pretty hectic and hard to understand, but it's much better than it was.
I think it looks very good. As I said, when I played it, I had a good time, and it was a smooth game. It ran well. And overall, just as I said, the art style to this game is something that really popped out to me. So I really enjoyed that as well. Is there anything you wanted to add before we kind of wrap things up? Something you wanted to touch on? Something you wanted to, social media, whatever it may be?
Sure, yeah. Like I said before, the game's coming out in October for early access. Of course, it's still not going to be finished. That's gonna be, it's just me, myself, working on this, so there may be issues down the line with that. But I highly recommend anyone listening to Wishlist the game there, because it really does help out the old algorithms, and jump on, check it out whenever you feel ready. I'm going to be putting out updates every 2 months until about this time next year, when I launch my full release. So it'll get more and more in depth as the months go on. If you want to join the Discord, I have a Discord channel, as well as a Twitter, which is Kainga Game.
So there you have it. There's my interview with Erik about his game, Kainga. I had a blast talking about this game. The art style, mechanics, the thinker, all of it are very intriguing. They're very unique, and they really add a whole nother element to what a town builder can be and what it should be. I can't wait for you to check it out. I have all of his social pages below. I have the Discord, YouTube, Twitter, everything else. It's all down there, so go check it out. Show him all the love in the world because Erik deserves it. This game is very special. It's going to be great when it launches in October to early access. I cannot wait for you to check it out. And while you're there, why don't you come back here when you're done checking it out and subscribe to the channel and maybe like the video while you're at it, because without you, the side quest is just not the same. So, I am Nick. This is the side quest. Show Erik some love. Show all the indie devs some love because we've got more interviews on the way. But until next time, I will see you later.